All right, so this is for some advanced domain and range identification. Sometimes when we have functions, especially piecewise functions, we have gaps in our domain or our range. And so the way that we write the domain and range looks kind of a little funky when this happens. And those of you who plan to continue far on with your math career, you'll do a lot more with this when you get to calculus because when you have these kind of gaps, we have what's called discontinuity. These are mostly a type of discontinuity called jump discontinuity. But again, you'll learn more about that in calculus if you plan on taking it eventually. Um, for now, we don't need to know the types of discontinuity. What we do need to know how to do is identify what the domain and range is. So what we generally say on a graph is if you're trying to identify the domain, we're going left to right. So I always kind of run my finger along the graph. So it's if the graph continues on to like the edge and doesn't have an arrow, that just, it's implied arrow if it goes all the way to the edge. So I'm just going to draw that little arrow on there just so we don't have any confusion. You can go ahead and do the same on yours. These ones, they didn't go quite to the edge, so they drew the arrow on here. Same thing here, they drew them on the edges. These ones you can see have endpoints, so we don't need arrows on those. So that means that if I'm tracing, and I'll use red here, all the way from the left, from my domain, I'm going, and then suddenly here I have to pick up my finger or my pencil. And that x value looks like it's at about -1. But when I pick back up, I'm picking back up at that exact same x value. So even though there was a hole here, I picked myself right back up in the exact same place. So I've not skipped any x values. And then I keep going, and it's got an arrow, so it goes on forever. So that means in this case, my domain is not interrupted. Even though I had to pick up my pencil, it picked up at the exact same spot. So that means that actually, in this case, our domain in interval notation is -infinity to infinity still, because I was able to not have any values skipped. In inequality notation, I'll use a different color for that. Remember that in inequality notation, we just say that x is between -infinity and infinity, no equal signs. So that's the same thing as saying x can be anything. So now we go for y's, and while x's, our domain is from left to right with tracing, our range is from bottom to top because we always go least to greatest. So on the bottom, I've got nothing under here. This right here is the first y value that I have. And my scale is counting by twos, so 2, 4, it's halfway in between. So this is -5. So the first defined value for my range is -5. Then I have to jump up here, and I do skip values. There are no, and it's really hard because it's so small, so it's hard for me to, this little brace is trying to show you there are no y values in between this guy and this guy, in between -5 and -4. Now -4 is defined, and then from there I can go all the way up to infinity. So the way that we do this in interval notation, because -5 is all by itself, it's not connected, we do the -5 by itself, it's included, there are y values equal to it, so it gets brackets on both sides. And then what we do is we use this symbol that looks just like kind of an uppercase U. It means union. It just basically means and. It means that -5 is part of the range, and then from -4, that was a closed circle, so we include it, -4 all the way up to infinity. And so that's how we would write that there. For inequality notation, we would actually have to write y equals -5 and y greater than or equal to -4. So hopefully that kind of makes sense what we're doing there. And again, this is the advanced version. So there's no harm in trying. If you want to try to stretch yourself, but you're having a little trouble, that's okay. If you can master the regular domain and range and have a little bit of trouble but learn something on the advanced, that's awesome. So don't feel too bad if you're a little confused thus far. So now we're going to look at B and do the same thing. So as I go from left to right, because left to right is my domain, I've got an arrow that goes this way, which means that goes all the way to the left. Slowly, it's going down faster than it's going left, but it is going to the left. So it's got everything over there. As I continue, I've got a hole here at -1, but it picks back up here. So same value, I haven't skipped anything, that's a closed circle. Then I can keep tracing to the right until I get here. I've got a hole at 1, which means 1 is not included and there is a gap. So I have a domain gap here between 1 and 2. Then at 2, it picks back up and goes on forever. So here I had to jump, but I didn't have any skipped values. So I went from -infinity all the way, because this I didn't skip. The only place I hit a skip was here at +1. And it's an open circle, which means +1 is not part of the domain. So I went all the way from -infinity to +1. Then I had to jump, and I didn't pick back up until 2. Oops, that one should be a bracket because it's a closed circle. So then from 2 all the way to infinity. And then inequality notation here, I have x is less than 1 and x is greater than or equal to 2. For my range, down to up, so down, I definitely have -infinity because I've got an arrow going down here. When I get to -2, however, that's an open circle, which means it's not included, and there's a big jump here in the y values. So that means that I'm going to need to have a jump. So that means that on the range, we went from -infinity up to, but not including -2. And then we jumped, and we didn't pick back up again until we had our x at, looks like it's about +1, and that is included. Now the y, there's no more gap, because here's all kinds of values we have at +1 for y. And then it goes on forever. So from 1 up to and including infinity. So then when we write that in inequality notation, that means that y is less than -2, and y can also be greater than or equal to 1. All right. I want you to give C a try and pause the video and then come back to check yourself. All right, so checking your answer, hopefully you found that there actually are no gaps in the domain because where one x leaves off, the other one picks right back up there. So -infinity to infinity on the domain. The range, however, because they're all horizontal lines, they're just individual values. So the y values we have are -2 and 1 and 3. So kind of weird looking, but that's how we write it. So domain in inequality, x is between negative infinity and infinity. And for the range, you can just write y equals -2, 1, 3. You don't have to write out the equals that many times. All right, last one. This one also, because it does not have arrows, it's a little trickier. So when we do the domain, this is a closed circle, and I need to count. My eyes aren't super good, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4 is where this is. So that's at -4, and then -5, -6, -7, -8, -9. I think it is. Okay, and then this is 1, 2, 3, and this must be +9. We're going to hope that that's the case. So the x values go from -9 to -4. Look though here, don't get tricked. These are both open circles, which means that -4 is not included in the domain. So we include -9, but we do not include -4. Then we continue on. So we actually pick the exact same start point, but notice, not included. It's still an open circle. And then we go to 3. 3 is included because it's closed here, all the way up until the only time we actually stop then is +9, and it's an open circle, so parenthesis there. So that's our domain. In the other format, we would say that that means that x is between -9 and 4 and between 4 and 9. For our range, then horizontal again, so we can say y equals, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -7 perhaps down there. So y equals -7, and then here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, +4, and 5, 6, +7. On our inequality notation up here, or interval notation, sorry, we would just have those same values just like we did on the last one. So -7 and 4 and 7. Remember that on the y values, they're definitely included regardless of circles. All right, so see your teacher if you need some help. Hopefully that didn't seem as bad as it originally seemed.